Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our Sunday Srimad Bhagavatam class. So we are reading the 5th chapter of Canto 1, where Narada Muni has come to guide his disciple Srila Vyasadeva. We read last week how when the disciple is seeking guidance or is in a position of despondence, the Guru will appear to clear any doubts and any despondence that the disciple may have. So there was a brief interaction between Narada Muni and Srila Vyasadeva in the shlokas that we read last week, with Narada Muni asking, why are you despondent? And then Srila Vyasadeva glorifies his spiritual master by comparing him to the air that is all pervasive, to the sun that is shining, and also to one who is equivalent to the Paramatma who travels all over. And then Vyasadeva requests his spiritual master to identify what is the issue that he is facing, so that it could be rectified. So today we will go from Shloka 8, and if we have time, we'll go all the way to Shloka 14. So just to tell you, in the first 4 shlokas, Narada Muni is inquiring as to why Srila Vyasadeva is feeling the way he's feeling. He's not feeling satisfied. Why would a disciple not feel satisfied after compiling all of the Vedas with the help of his disciples and then writing the Puranas and the Mahabharata, etc. And then in shlokas 5 to 7, which we did last week, it is those shlokas where Srila Vyasadeva is requesting his guru to find out the root cause of his feeling this particular way. So today's session, as well as probably the next 2 Sundays session, is going to go from shloka number 8 all the way to shloka number 22. From shloka 8 to shloka 22, Narada Muni describes the importance of glorifying Lord Krishna. And that seems to be the core problem, that Srila Vyasadeva, while he has compiled all the Vedic scriptures, he has not glorified Lord Krishna. So from shlokas 8 to 22, Narada Muni will speak about the importance. When you write something, it is better you write about Krishna than about any other mundane subject matter. So let's look at these shlokas today from 8 to 22. But today, shlokas 8 and 9, Narada Muni is going to diagnose Vyasadeva's problem. And in shlokas 8 and 9, Narada Muni finds 2 problems with Vyasadeva. And that is what we're going to look at today, which is shloka number 8 of chapter 5 of Canto 1. Okay. Shri Narada Uvacha.
Shri Narada Uvacha.
Bhavatanudita Prayam.
Bhavatanudita Prayam.
Yasho Bhagavato Malam.
Yasho Bhagavato Malam.
Yenaivasau natushyeta.
Yenaivasau natushyeta.
Manyetad darshanam khilam.
Manyetad darshanam khilam.
Word for word meaning, translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Jai.
Sri Naradaha.
Shri Naradaha.
Sri Narada.
Shri Narada.
Uvacha.
Uvacha.
Said. Bhavata.
Bhavata.
By you. Anudita Prayam.
Anudita Prayam.
Almost not praised. Yashaha. Glories. Bhavataha. Bhagavataha. Of the personality of Godhead. Amalam. Spotless.
spotless,
yena,
yena,
by which,
by which,
eva,
eva,
certainly,
certainly,
asau,
asau,
he the personality of Godhead,
he the personality of Godhead,
na,
na,
does not,
does not,
tushyeta,
tushyeta,
be pleased,
be pleased,
manye,
manye,
I think,
I think,
tat,
tat,
that,
that,
darshanam,
darshanam,
philosophy,
philosophy,
khilam,
kilam,
inferior.
inferior.
Translation, Sri Narada said,
Sri Narada said,
you have not actually broadcast
you have not actually broadcast
the sublime and spotless glories
the sublime and spotless glories
of the personality of Godhead.
of the personality of Godhead.
That philosophy,
That philosophy,
which does not satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord,
which does not satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord,
is considered worthless.
is considered worthless.
But you have to remember, all these purports were written by Prabhupada before he started ISKCON. So when Srila Prabhupada was living in Vrindavan in the Damodar temple, that's when he wrote the commentaries to the first three cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam. So these commentaries, you can imagine, were written before ISKCON was even founded. The eternal relation of an individual soul with the supreme soul personality of Godhead is constitutionally one of being the eternal servitor of the eternal master. That means the Jivatma is always in the servant position in relationship to the Paramatma. Eternally, this relationship is there. We are servants and the Lord is our master. The Lord has expanded himself as living beings in order to accept loving service from them, and this alone can satisfy both the Lord and the living beings. Such a scholar as Vyasadeva has completed many expansions of the Vedic literatures, ending with the Vedanta philosophy. But none of them have been written directly glorifying the personality of Godhead, which is what Narada Muni is finding the first defect. What is the first defect in everything that Srila Vyasadeva has written? There's hardly any glorification of Lord Krishna. Directly, there is no glorification of Lord Krishna. Dry philosophical speculations, even on the transcendental subject of the absolute, have very little attraction without directly dealing with the glorification of the Lord. So Prabhupada is explaining that when you write commentaries on the Vedic scriptures, the subject matter is very dry. You have to do this in order to get that. You have to do this in order to get that. You have to perform these rituals. You have to recite these following mantras. You have to do these yajnas. These are all very dry topics. But the minute you write about the Supreme Lord, then suddenly the topic becomes very sweet and very relishable. So that means the vast majority of the Vedas are not very attractive to the general mass of people. But if one writes about the pastimes of the Lord, then that becomes very, very attractive. The personality of Godhead is the last word in transcendental realization. The absolute realized as impersonal Brahman or localized supersoul Paramatma is less productive of transcendental bliss than the supreme personal realization of his glories. So Prabhupada is talking about Brahman realization, Paramatma realization, and is comparing it to Bhagavan realization. So there are three levels of realization, beginning with Brahman realization, which is what the Jnanis are seeking. So those who pursue the path of Jnana Yoga, the study of the scriptures, their goal is Brahman realization. Then you have those who practice Ashtanga Yoga, they are called the yogis, the Dhyana yogis. Their ultimate goal is Paramatma realization. So they meditate on the Paramatma within them. Whereas devotees or Vaishnavas are only focused on Bhagavan realization, because if you attain Bhagavan realization includes Paramatma realization and Brahman realization. Therefore, Brahman realization by itself is not considered complete. Paramatma realization is also not considered complete. Bhagavan realization is considered complete, because you understand the Lord both in his, that he has impersonal and personal features simultaneously, and he is the Paramatma pervading all of the material universe. But with Brahman realization and Paramatma realization, you don't get that level of transcendental bliss and joy that the devotee gets by worshipping Lord Krishna. That is what Prabhupada is explaining in this particular paragraph. So if you want to experience the highest level of transcendental bliss, you have to worship Krishna. You have to perform Bhakti Yoga. So the Jnanis don't experience as much bliss as the Bhaktas do. The Dhyana yogis do not experience as much bliss as the Bhaktas do. So the compiler of the Vedanta Darshana is Vyasadeva himself. Yet he is troubled, although he is the author. So what sort of transcendental bliss can be derived by the readers and listeners of Vedanta, which is not explained directly by Vyasadeva, the author? So the question is, if the author is not satisfied with what he has written, can the readers and listeners be satisfied? If the author itself is not satisfied? Herein arises the necessity of explaining Vedanta Sutra in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam by the self-same author. So this lays the foundation for Sri Narada Muni to tell his disciple, Vedanta Sutra is fantastic. Nobody is going to understand it. Nobody is going to relish it. What have you missed writing? You have missed writing about, directly about, who is Krishna, what is his position, how great he is, his qualities, his pastimes. This is what is going to bring immense transformation in the hearts of the Jivatmas. And that is in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. So that is why it is said, anybody who reads the Srimad Bhagavatam every day, even for 10-15 minutes, one shloka per day, there are approximately 18,000 shlokas. So if you read one shloka a day, your heart is being purified. So that brings us to the second defect that Narada Muni identifies in his disciple, which is shloka number 9. Yatha dharmadayascharthaah
Yatha dharmadayascharthaah
munivaryanukirtitaah
munivaryanukirtitaah
na tatha vasudevasya
na tatha vasudevasya
mahimahyanuvarnitah.
mahimah anuvarnitah.
Yatha,
Yatha,
as
much as
dharma adayah,
dharma adayah,
all 4 principles of religious behavior,
all 4 principles of religious behavior,
cha,
cha,
and
and
arthah,
artah,
purposes,
purposes,
munivarya,
munivarya,
by yourself,
by yourself,
the great sage,
the great sage,
anukirtitah,
anukirtitaah,
repeatedly described,
repeatedly described,
na,
na,
not,
not,
tatha,
tatha,
in that way,
in that way,
vasudevasya,
Vasudevasya,
of the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna,
of the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna,
Mahima,
Mahima,
glories,
glories,
he
certainly,
Anuvarnitaha,
Anuvarnitaha,
so constantly described.
so constantly described.
Translation. Although great sage,
Although great sage,
you have very broadly described
you have very broadly described
the four principles,
the four principles,
beginning with religious performances.
beginning with religious performances.
You have not described
You have not described
the glories of the Supreme Personality Vasudeva.
the glories of the Supreme Personality Vasudeva.
The prompt diagnosis of Sri Narada is at once declared. So Narada Muni has identified the problem. What has Vyasadeva not done? He's not glorified Vasudeva. The root cause of the despondency of Vyasadeva was his deliberate avoidance of glorifying the Lord in his various editions of the Puranas. He has certainly, as a matter of course, given descriptions of the glories of the Lord Sri Krishna, but not as many as given to religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation. So Prabhupada is explaining, what has Srila Vyasadeva done in the compilation of the Vedas and the Vedanta Sutra, the Puranas, the Mahabharata? The focus has been on the four Purusharthas: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So when you're focused on Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, where is there time to focus on Lord Krishna alone? So Sri Narada Muni is telling his disciple, you spend too much hours, too much time, too much words in writing about material things. That is why you're not happy. These four items are by far inferior to engagement in the devotional service of the Lord. Sri Vyasadeva, as the authorized scholar, knew very well this difference. And still, instead of giving more importance to the better type of engagement, namely devotional service to the Lord, he had more or less improperly used his valuable time. And thus he was despondent. Imagine you spent a lot of time and effort in doing something and you're not satisfied. How you will feel? You will feel you're not productive, even though you spent so many hours, days, months, years trying to get something in place. So Narada Muni said, it would have been better if you had just written only about Krishna. Why so much time spent on the four Purusharthas? The four Purusharthas, people will get entangled in Maya if they follow that. Better than moksha is to actually glorify the Supreme Lord and teach how everyone can perform bhakti. From this, it is clearly indicated that no one can be pleased substantially without being engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, this fact is clearly mentioned. After liberation, which is the last item in the line of performing religiosity, etc., one is engaged in pure devotional service. So liberation is not our ultimate goal. Everybody in our country especially speaks of moksha, moksha, moksha. But the goal is not liberation. The goal is bhakti. Because bhakti includes liberation. So if you perform bhakti, you've gone beyond the liberated stage already. This is called the stage of self-realization or the Brahma Bhuta stage. After attainment of this Brahma Bhuta stage, which is the status of performing bhakti yoga, one is satisfied. But satisfaction is the beginning of transcendental bliss. So moksha simply indicates that you have attained some peace of mind. You've really not experienced bliss. This Sri Krishna explains in chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita. And passing the stage of equanimity, one is fixed in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So after you attain moksha, then you can start practicing bhakti. Therefore, Srila Vyasadeva should have gone to the ultimate goal of life itself, focused all his attention on describing the glories of the Lord, because that will be the easiest way for the Jivatmas in Kali Yuga to go back to the Supreme Lord. The conclusion is that in order to maintain the status quo of the Brahma Bhuta stage, as also to increase the degree of transcendental realization, Narada recommended to Vyasadeva that he, Vyasadeva, should now eagerly and repeatedly describe the path of devotional service. This would cure him from gross despondency. So Narada Muni says, I know what is the cure for your illness. You have to write about the Supreme Lord. And that's how Srimad Bhagavatam comes into picture, which brings us to shloka number 10. Nayadvachaschitra padam hareryashaha
Nayadvachaschitra arereshaha
jagat pavitram pragrinita karhichit
Jagat pavitram pragranita karichit
tadvayasam tirtham ushanti manasa
Tadvayasam tirtam ushanti manasa
nayatra hamsa niramantyu shikshayah.
Nayatra amsa niramantya shikshayaha
Na,
Na,
not,
not,
yat,
yet,
that,
that,
vachaha,
vachaha,
vocabulary,
vocabulary,
chitrapadam,
chitrapadam,
decorative,
decorative,
harehe,
arehe,
of the Lord,
of the Lord,
yashaha,
yashayaha,
yashaha,
yashaha,
glories,
glories,
jagat,
jagat,
universe,
universe,
pavitram,
pavitram,
sanctified,
sanctified,
pragranita,
pragrinita,
described,
described,
karhichit,
karihichit,
hardly,
hardly,
tat,
tat,
that,
that,
vayasam,
vayasam,
crows,
cross,
tirtham,
tirtham,
place of pilgrimage,
place of pilgrimage,
ushanti,
ushanti,
think,
think,
manasaha,
manasaha,
saintly persons,
saintly persons,
na,
na,
not,
not,
yatra,
yatra,
where,
where,
hamsaha,
amsaha,
all perfect beings,
all perfect beings,
niramanti,
niramanti,
take pleasure,
take pleasure,
ushikshayaha,
ushikshayaha,
those who reside in the transcendental abode.
those who reside in the transcendental abode.
Translation. Those words
which
do not describe the glories of the Lord,
do not describe the glories of the Lord,
who alone can sanctify the atmosphere of the whole universe,
who alone can sanctify the atmosphere of the whole universe,
are considered by saintly persons to be like unto a place of pilgrimage for crows.
to be like unto a place of pilgrimage for crows.
Since the all perfect persons
Since the all perfect persons
are inhabitants of the transcendental abode,
are inhabitants of the transcendental abode,
they do not derive any pleasure there.
they do not derive any pleasure there.
Crows and swans are not birds of the same feather because of their different mental attitudes. The fruitive workers or passionate men are compared to the crows, whereas the all perfectly saintly persons are compared to the swans. So writing about dharma, artha, kama, moksha is appealing to the crows. Writing about the Supreme Lord is appealing to the swans, saintly people. The crows take pleasure in a place where garbage is thrown out, just as the passionate fruitive workers take pleasure in wine and women and places for gross sense pleasure. So Srila Vyasadeva has written more about how you can achieve your material desires. And saintly people are not interested in material desires, because material desires are like crows going to a garbage pile trying to pick out the best thing that they can consume. The swans do not take pleasure in the places where crows are assembled for conferences and meetings. They are instead seen in the atmosphere of natural scenic beauty, where there are transparent reservoirs of water, nicely decorated with stems of lotus flowers in variegated colors of natural beauty. That is the difference between the two classes of birds. So Narada Muni is using this analogy of the crows to describe that the vast majority of what Srila Vyasadeva has written so far, along with his disciples, are going to satisfy the crows. And the devotees are not interested in the subject matter that attracts the crows, because crows hang around garbage. Nature has influenced different species of life with different mentalities, and it is not possible to bring them up into the same rank and file. So you can color the crow white, that doesn't make it a swan, because its tendencies will still be there. Similarly, there are different kinds of literature for different types of men of different mentality. Mostly the market literatures which attract men of the crows categories are literatures containing refused remnants of sensuous topics. So anything that we do to pursue sense gratification, whether it is food, it is travel, or it is wealth, or it is women, or it is wine, these are considered rejects by saints. They know this is not going to taste good for too long. They are generally known as mundane talks in relation with the gross body and subtle mind. They are full of subject matter described in decorative language, full of mundane similes and metaphorical arrangements. Vyasadeva has written such perfect poetry in the Vedic scriptures. What is the point of perfect poetry? Great alliteration, great metaphors, great allegories. What is the point of speech and words that describe the mundane? That is why Prabhupada writes in the previous purport that Vyasadeva has wasted his valuable time writing about something that is temporary. So the literature may be perfect grammatically, but even literature that is not perfect but glorifies the Lord is far more valuable to human society. Yet with all that, they do not glorify the Lord. Such poetry and prose on any subject matter is considered decoration of a dead body. Prabhupada uses this analogy quite often. In many cultures, when somebody passes away, the dead body is decorated very nicely. On the way to the funeral pyre or on the way to the burial ground. So anything to do with sense gratification is like decorating a dead body. The life is gone out of the dead body. Spiritually advanced men who are compared to the swans do not take pleasure in such dead literatures, which are sources of pleasure for men who are spiritually dead. That is why the comparison to crows hanging around garbage bins. Such literature does not attract the saintly people. These literatures in the mode of passion and ignorance are distributed under different labels, but they can hardly help the spiritual urge of the human being. And thus the swan-like spiritually advanced men have nothing to do with them. Such spiritually advanced men are called manasa, Also because they always keep up the standard of transcendental voluntary service to the Lord on the spiritual plane. So you are considered an animal if you are pursuing sense gratification. You are considered a human being if you're pursuing devotional service to the Supreme Lord. This completely forbids fruitive activities for gross bodily sense satisfaction or subtle speculation of the material egoistic mind. Social, literary men, scientists, mundane poets, theoretical philosophers, and politicians who are completely absorbed in the material advancement of sense pleasure are all dolls of the material energy. They are being controlled by Maya Devi. She'll just crush them some way or the other. They take pleasure in a place where rejected subject matters are thrown. According to Swami Sridhara, this is the pleasure of the prostitute hunters. But literatures which describe the glories of the Lord are enjoyed by the Paramahamsas, who have grasped the essence of human activities. So essentially here in Shloka 10 and in the upcoming Shloka 11, Narada Muni is describing two types of literature. In Shloka 10, dead literature. In Shloka 11, literature that gives you spiritual life. And it gives you spiritual bliss. So let's look at Shloka number 11. Tadvag visargo janatagha viplavaha.
Tadvag visargo janataga viplavaha.
Yasmin pratishlokam abadhavatyapi.
Yasmin pratishlokam abadhyavatyapi.
Namanyanantasya yashonkitani yat.
Namanyanantyasya shonkitanyat.
Shrinvanti gayanti grananti sadhavaha.
Shrinvanti gayanti grananti sadhavaha.
Tat.
Tat. That.
Vak. Vocabulary. Visargaha. Creation. Janata. The people in general. Agha. Sins. Viplavaha. Revolutionary. Yasmin. In which. Pratishlokam. Each and every stanza. Abadhavati. Irregularly composed. Api. In spite of. Namani. Transcendental names, etc. Anantasya. Of the unlimited Lord. Yashaha. Glories. Ankitani. Depicted. Yat. What. Shrinvanti. Do hear. Gayanti. Do sing. Grananti. Do accept. Sadhavaha. The purified men who are honest. Translation. On the other hand, that literature which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, forms, pastimes, etc. of the unlimited Supreme Lord
of the unlimited Supreme Lord
is a different creation,
is a different creation,
full of transcendental words,
full of transcendental words,
directed toward bringing about
directed towards bringing about
a revolution
a revolution
in the impious lives
in the impious lives
of this world's misdirected civilization.
of this world's misdirected civilization.
Such transcendental literatures,
Such transcendental literatures,
even though imperfectly composed,
even though imperfectly composed,
are heard, sung,
sung,
and accepted
and accepted
by purified men
by purified men
who are thoroughly honest.
who are thoroughly honest.
It is a qualification of the great thinkers to pick up the best, even from the worst. It is said that the intelligent man should pick up nectar from a stalk of poison, should accept gold even from a filthy place, should accept a good and qualified wife even from an obscure family, and should accept a good lesson even from a man or from a teacher who comes from the untouchables. So those who are saintly look for the best in everything and in everyone. They don't focus on, like flies, they are attracted to the sores on the body. That is not a saintly person. We have to be like bees, attracted to the honey in everybody. These are some of the ethical instructions for everyone in every place without exception. But a saint is far above the level of an ordinary man. He is always absorbed in glorifying the Supreme Lord, because by broadcasting the holy name and fame of the Supreme Lord, the polluted atmosphere of the world will change. And as a result of propagating the transcendental literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam, people will become sane in their transactions. So Prabhupada is writing, if you write mundane literature or content on mundane things, it really doesn't benefit anybody. It just entraps them more. But if you write transcendental literature, the broadcast of transcendental literature will change the hearts of every man. And if it changes the hearts of every man, then certainly the world will be a different place. So broadcasting the holy names of the Lord, broadcasting the glories and fame of the Lord is actually what is the urgent need in Kali Yuga. Then the polluted atmosphere will change, not the external pollution, the internal pollution. By reading and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada is writing, people will become sane in their transactions. Sane means not mad. While preparing this commentation on this particular stanza of Srimad Bhagavatam, we have a crisis before us. So when Prabhupada was writing this purport in the Damodara, Sri Radha Damodara temple in Vrindavan, there was a crisis with our neighbor China. Our neighboring friend China has attacked the border of India with a militaristic spirit. We have practically no business in the political field. Prabhupada is saying, I have nothing to do with politics. Yet we see that previously there were both China and India, and they both lived peacefully for centuries without ill feeling. The reason is that they lived those days in an atmosphere of God consciousness. And every country over the surface of the world was God-fearing, pure-hearted, and simple. And there was no question of political diplomacy. There is no cause of quarrel between the two countries, China and India, over land which is not suitable for habitation. The place that two countries are fighting over, you can't even live there because it is so cold. And certainly there is no cause for fighting on this issue. But due to the age of quarrel, Kali, which we have discussed, there is always a chance of quarrel on the slight provocation. The smallest of things, there is going to be a war. This is due not to the issue in question, but to the polluted atmosphere of this age. Systematically, there is propaganda by a section of people to stop the glorification of the name and fame of the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada is probably thinking about the communist countries where there was a declaration of war on God and God consciousness. In those days in Russia and in China, you couldn't worship the Supreme Lord. Therefore, there is a great need for disseminating the message of Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world. It is the duty of every responsible Indian to broadcast the transcendental message of Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the world to all the supermost good, as well as to bring about the desired peace in the world. Actually, there is an instruction from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu where he tells us that we should, Indians being born in India, we should propagate Krishna consciousness. We should spread the message of the Lord across the globe. That is our fundamental duty. Our fundamental duty is to propagate Krishna consciousness. Yeah. It is the duty of every responsible Indian to broadcast the transcendental message of Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the world, to do all the supermost good, as well as to bring about the desired peace in the world. Because India has failed in her duty by neglecting this responsible work. There is so much quarrel and trouble all over the world. Prabhupada is writing this in the early 1960s, saying that Indians have abandoned their core dharma. Many great people have visited India from China, from the Middle East, from the West, to learn from India about spirituality. So Prabhupada is saying India has actually abandoned its duty. Because we have neglected taking the Shastras to all the people. Because of that, there is quarrel and trouble all over the world. We are confident that if the transcendental message of Srimad Bhagavatam is received only by the leading men of the world, certainly there will be a change of heart, and naturally the people in general will follow them. So Prabhupada is saying, first we should take the Srimad Bhagavatam to all the politicians and leaders across the globe. Then there will be a transformation in their hearts. And if there is a transformation in their hearts, then the citizens of their country's hearts will also be transformed. The mass of people in general are tools in the hands of modern politicians and leaders of the people. If there is a change in heart of the leaders only, certainly there will be a radical change in the atmosphere of the world. So Prabhupada is saying this literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, by itself is such a valuable literature. No matter how hard-hearted you may be, your heart will certainly get transformed. We know that our honest attempt to present this great literature, conveying transcendental messages for reviving the God consciousness of the people in general and re-spiritualizing the world atmosphere, is fraught with many difficulties. But Prabhupada is saying, you know, I'm making an endeavor to write all of these translations in English, but I also accept that this is not an easy task to take this literature across the globe. To take Srimad Bhagavatam across the entire universe, it's not an easy thing. So Prabhupada is saying, I am making an honest attempt. But indirectly, Prabhupada is saying, I need all of your help to take this literature far and wide, in whatever small way or big way that you can. Our presenting this matter in adequate language, especially a foreign language. English is not the first language of Prabhupada. Our presenting this matter in adequate language, especially a foreign language, will certainly fail. And there will be so many literary discrepancies despite our honest attempt to present it in the proper way. So humble Srila Prabhupada is. He's saying my work is not perfect, but my attempt is honest. But we are sure that with all our faults in this connection, the seriousness of the subject matter will be taken into consideration, and the leaders of society will still accept this due to its being an honest attempt to glorify the Almighty God. You can just imagine Prabhupada sitting alone in that room in Shri Radha Damodar temple, writing this purport, saying, I know I have a difficult task ahead of me. I know what I've written is not perfect, but the perfection comes about because whatever I'm writing, I'm glorifying Krishna. So if you're glorifying Krishna, how can it be imperfect? Because that's what Narada Muni has said here. The perfection of literature is to glorify the Lord. Yet Prabhupada is saying, I know my attempt is not perfect. When there is fire in a house, the inmates of the house go out to get help from the neighbors who may be foreigners. And yet, without knowing the language, the victims of the fire express themselves and the neighbors understand the need, even though not expressed in the same language. So Prabhupada is saying, there is a burning fire across the globe. Somebody needs to bring attention to the fact there is a fire and one needs help. The same spirit of cooperation is needed to broadcast this transcendental message of the Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the polluted atmosphere of the world. After all, it is a technical science of spiritual values, and thus we are concerned with the techniques and not with the language. Prabhupada saying the process of bhakti yoga is the most important message that has to be conveyed to the polluted people. The language may not be perfect, but the subject matter itself is perfect. If the techniques of this great literature are understood by the people of the world, there will be success. Which means Prabhupada is saying, follow the instructions of acharyas. The technique of performing bhakti yoga is chanting, reading, hearing, praying to the Lord, offering obeisances to the Lord. The technique is perfect. When there are too many materialistic activities by the people in general all over the world, there is no wonder that a person or a nation attacks another person or a nation on slight provocation. So Prabhupada is saying, if there is no God consciousness in every single human being, there will always be wars between people, between nations. That is the rule of this age of Kali or quarrel, which is what Srila Vyasadeva had already seen when we read the first canto. He was worried that people of Kali Yuga are going to have great difficulty. The atmosphere is already polluted with corruption of all description, and everyone knows it well. There are so many unwanted literatures full of materialistic ideas of sense gratification. In many countries, there are bodies appointed by the state to detect and censor obscene literature. This means that neither the government nor the responsible leaders of the public want such literature. Yet it is in the marketplace because the people want it for sense gratification. So there is a lot of objectionable content in the digital space, and people get addicted to it. The people in general want to read. That is a natural instinct. But because their minds are polluted, they want such literatures. What literature? Literature that has nothing to do with Krishna is what interests them most. Why? Because their consciousness is polluted. Under the circumstances, transcendental literature like Srimad Bhagavatam will not only diminish the activities of the corrupt mind of the people in general, but also it will supply food for their hankering after reading some interesting literature. So Prabhupada is saying all of us have a taste to read. Why not read the Srimad Bhagavatam? It will reduce the pollution, internal pollution. In the beginning, they may not like it because one suffering from jaundice is reluctant to take sugar candy. The person who has jaundice, sugar candy tastes bitter, even though sugar candy is the cure for jaundice. But we should know that sugar candy is the only remedy for jaundice. Similarly, let there be systematic propaganda for popularizing reading of the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which will act like sugar candy for the jaundice-like condition of sense gratification. When men have a taste for this literature, the other literatures which are catering poison to society will then automatically cease. Prabhupada is writing this before he started ISKCON. Before he went to the United States at the ripe old age of 69. How much trouble Srila Prabhupada took to bring the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam to us in English. At the age of 70, when he could have very well retired as a sannyasi, he took the trouble of crossing the ocean to take this literature to the West. And because of Srila Prabhupada's efforts, so many devotees have been transformed by this literature. All over the world, there are ISKCON temples that are preaching Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam in all corners of this globe. That is because of one individual, Srila Prabhupada. We are sure, therefore, that everyone in human society will welcome Srimad Bhagavatam, even though it is now presented with so many faults, for it is recommended by Sri Narada, who has very kindly appeared in this chapter. You can just imagine the pain that Prabhupada is experiencing as he's writing that purport, saying people don't know that they are suffering. They don't know, they are so caught up in material desires. People are so unfortunate, they don't know who Shri Krishna is. And therefore it is the duty of every citizen of this Bharatavarsha to take this literature far and wide. Prabhupada started this in 1965. In 1966, ISKCON was established. Prabhupada was 70 years old. So he has left so much seva for us out of his causeless mercy. So each one of us should take up to preaching very sincerely. Because a great Acharya, once in a lifetime Acharya has come and shown us how to do it. Even though English was not his first language, Prabhupada would preach in English in New York. That's how he started this preaching movement. So we owe a great deal of gratitude and we are completely indebted to Srila Prabhupada. So how do we pay back? Actually, we cannot pay back a great Acharya. But how do we start attempting to pay back for what Prabhupada endured, the sacrifices that he endured for us? By following his instructions in the purport. So what we have read so far is Shloka number 10 was Narada Muni criticizing materialistic literature, which is what Vyasadeva had focused on. And in Shloka 11, Narada Muni said, but if you describe the glories of the Lord, it can transform the hearts of anybody who hears it, who reads it, etc. Okay, so the words are not important. The beauty of the poetry is not important. What is important is that the Lord is being described. The Lord's pastime is being described. So this begins a new section. So from shlokas 12 to shlokas 16, Narada Muni will tell Vyasadeva, bhakti is the only valuable asset for anybody. So let's look at shloka number 12. Naishkarmyamapyachyuta bhavavarjitam
नैष्कर्म्यमप्यच्युतभाववर्जितम्
न शोभते ज्ञानमलं निरञ्जनम्
न शोभते ज्ञानम् अलम् निरञ्जनम्
कुतः पुनः शश्वदभद्रमीश्वरे
कुतः पुनः शश्वत् अभद्रमीश्वरे
न चार्पितं कर्म यद्यप्यकारणम्
न चार्पितं कर्म यद्यप्यकारणम्
नैष्कर्म्यम्
नैष्कर्म्यम्
self-realization,
self-realization,
being freed from the reactions of fruitive work,
being freed from the reactions of fruitive works,
api,
in
spite of, achyuta,
the
infallible Lord,
infallible Lord,
bhava, conception, varjitam,
parjitam,
devoid of, na, does not, shobhate, look well, jnanam, transcendental knowledge, alam, by and by, niranjanam, free from designations, kutaha, where is, punaha, again, shashvat, always, abhadram, uncongenial, ishvare, unto the Lord, na, not, cha, and, arpitam, offered, karma, fruitive works, yat api, what is, akaranam, not fruitive. Translation: knowledge of self-realization, even though free from all material affinity, does not look well if devoid of a conception of the infallible God. What then is the use of fruitive activities
What then is the use of fruitive activities
which are naturally painful,
which are naturally painful
from the very beginning
and
transient by nature,
if
they are not utilized
for
the devotional service of the Lord. So Narada Muni is asking a rhetorical question to Srila Vyasadeva. As referred to above, not only ordinary literatures devoid of the transcendental glorification of the Lord are condemned, but also Vedic literatures and speculation on the subject of impersonal Brahman when they are devoid of devotional service. So not only mundane subject matters are being critiqued by Sri Narada Muni, even that section of the Vedas, the Jnana Kanda, that speculate on Brahman without focusing on bhakti is also being criticized. When speculation on the impersonal Brahman is condemned on the above ground, then what to speak of ordinary fruitive work which is not meant to fulfill the aim of devotional service? So Narada Muni is criticizing the Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda sections of the Vedas compiled by Srila Vyasadeva. So essentially Narada Muni is saying, if Srila Vyasadeva is not teaching us how to use everything in the service of the Lord, what's the point? So Srila Vyasadeva has successfully, through his Vedic scriptures and compilation, successfully committed people to innumerable births and deaths. Should he not have focused on helping people not take birth again? Okay. Anyway, everything is an arrangement of the Lord for the purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam to be written. When speculation on the impersonal Brahman is condemned on the above ground, then what to speak of ordinary fruitive work which is not meant to fulfill the aim of devotional service? So, whatever is written, if there is nothing related to bhakti and worship of Lord Krishna, why is any of that work useful to anybody? Such speculative knowledge and fruitive work cannot lead one to the goal of perfection. So Narada Muni is asking how ultimately Jivatmas, especially human beings, are supposed to achieve perfection. That is why human life is so rare. When human life is so rare, shouldn't one be responsible and lead them to Krishna? Teach them about devotional service? Because that's the goal of human life. Fruitive work in which almost all people in general are engaged is always painful, either in the beginning or at the end. It can be fruitful only when made subservient to the devotional service of the Lord. So that means your material desires can be easily satisfied when you also perform bhakti. Then your material accomplishments also become purified. So first dharma is we are servants of the Supreme Lord, and therefore we have to worship him. In the Bhagavad Gita also it is confirmed that the result of such fruitive work may be offered for the service of the Lord, otherwise it leads to material bondage. So if we don't work for Krishna, it causes karmic reactions. The bona fide enjoyer of the fruitive work is the personality of Godhead, and thus, when it is engaged for the sense gratification of the living beings, it becomes an acute source of trouble. So that means whatever Srila Vyasadeva has written up until now, until this meeting with Sri Narada Muni, it is only going to cause more and more problems for the Jivatmas. No? That is what Prabhupada is also explaining in the purport. So we'll stop here and we will continue next Sunday and listen to what Sri Narada Muni has to say. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
Jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki